Hello and welcome back to the Bald Book Geek. I'm the host of this show. My name is William James and I've been sitting on this video for a long time for many reasons, and I was looking back at the Rings of Power debacle, the disaster that created and the destruction of Tolkien's work, when I realised, what would I do? What would I do to make this show? What would I do? And I want to know what you guys would do as well. If you were given the rights and that budget, what would you do? So instead of being an 8-hour television series, 8-episode, 8-hour TV show, whatever the runtime was in the end, because it all merged into one big soup, I would have done maybe 4 2-hour movies. That way you can preserve the timeline and focus on key moments within the appendices without squishing them all together. Tolkien estate didn't grant the rights of the Silmarillion to Amazon, so I'm working on the theory that we wouldn't have the rights either. So that's where I'm going with this. It would have preserved the timeline because you would have been able to pull the themes and the immortal characters and the long-lived characters through the timeline in these 4 2 hours. Only the 2 episodes at the end would link together much closer. So the first episode would focus on key events from Morgoth, the events of Sauron coming back, and it would bring those in. And then a lot of foreshadowing, by the way. Episode 2 would have moved through and we would have seen some more characters and so on, and you could have picked out those key events and done that set thousands of years apart while keeping them thematically similar. The last 2 episodes would have been more focused on the fall of Numenor, and then into the forging of the rings and the epic battle and war that happened at the end. Galadriel wouldn't have been the main focus and only there when she needed to be there or presented within Tolkien's work. She was never in Numenor. And this video was inspired also by one of my haters. So, hi Tim, I'm your local baldly bearded model, apparently. Hello. That I need to put that on a t-shirt, by the way. I would have focused on those characters and I would have focused on that kind of story structure, because you can tie things together thematically. Even if you split it into 8, you still could have tied those episodes together, and I think it would have been a great way to explore it, far more intelligent. I also would have portrayed the characters as they are presented within Tolkien's work, rather than making Galadriel the angry young woman with a sword whose husband doesn't seem to exist. She wouldn't have been that. She would have been the maid. She's one of the most important female characters within fantasy. And let's be real, Rings of Power serves her no justice at all. There's no way around that. She's so badly written, but then again, Hollywood right now doesn't know how to write women. That's a thing. I also would have presented Sauron truer to his character. There would have been no will they won't they love story. There would have been none of that, because she's the only one that didn't trust him. And I don't know why they flipped that on the head in this series. It makes no sense at all. And the shippers are weird. The shippers are definitely a weird set of people. I also would have kept the narrative of Tolkien's work. I would have kept it structured. Tolkien hated allegory. He hated that kind of thing. It's why him and Lewis had a very interesting relationship, because there was a lot of allegory to Lewis's work where there isn't within Tolkien's. Tolkien's world is far more matter-of-fact, and I would have kept the themes that run through, because Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and its extended material is a mythology of Anglo-Saxon Britain, and I would have kept those themes very much intact and presented the work as it should be presented. Now, nitpicky ones. I've seen cosplay armor that looks amazing, and I would have made sure that even the extras were in something that looked decent. No printed chainmail, people. Like, who thought that was a good idea when you can fake chainmail so cheaply? It just, yeah. The armor would have fitted the people, and I do understand kind of the Greco-Roman Greek vibe of Numenor, because it's allegory for, well, I say allegory, it's inspired by Atlantis, because Tolkien hated allegory completely, but it's inspired by Atlantis, so I do understand why they ran with that, although I still don't understand some of the costume pieces, because they feel very cheap. And there's actually some really good ideas into that mess of 3D printed plastic that they call armor. So imagine some of those designs presented actually as real armor, or at least made to look as close as possible. There would be no hobbits within my interpretation of the Rings of Power series. There would be absolutely none, because hobbits didn't do anything important in the Second Age. The only reason they're in Rings of Power is to replicate the Fellowship of the Ring. The Wizard. Now, the Wizard story is a bit more... I would have touched upon it, but again, I think I would have had elements of it played into the earlier episodes, or maybe at the end, just kind of establishing that story more than anything. I mean, it would be very easy to create a series based on the appendices alone, but you would have to pick and choose very carefully, and that's what I would do. I would pick and choose very careful sections to make up this mini-series type thing. And the end of it would have ended with the war, the fall of Numenor, the scene where the ring gets sliced off Sauron's finger. And I also would have sorted out continuity. You can tell this series went through major changes throughout filming, because there is some continuity errors which are nitpicky at best, but basic filmmaking mistakes. There's certain things, even if it's just putting a filter over the shot to make it look like a night shot rather than, oh, we filmed this and it's changing times of day. I think that's a thing. I think just structure as well. I think the story structure is really bad within Rings of Power, and I think overall it doesn't represent the story structure presented within the Second Age, but it also doesn't present the story structure of other fantasy things and other TV shows. The Last of Us, for example, is far better written, far less money, and comes out far better. The House of the Dragon, for example. I also wouldn't have made such obvious ripping out lines from the Lord of the Rings Fellowship, because there are lines and direct quotes from the Peter Jackson movies in this, which are really borderline and uncomfortable. They also borrowed elements of the Hobbit films, because they seem to be more inspired by the films than the actual books anyway. And also, I wouldn't have used the line and quote from Cate Blanchett as Queen Elizabeth I, which is a thing. The story structure of Rings of Power has got more in common with a Game of Thrones, Fellowship, Elizabeth the Golden Age kind of squashed together than actual anything else, and that causes problems. I also wouldn't have fired Tom Shippey. I would be bringing in every person possible from the Tolkien estate that would be involved. I would be bringing in the best, and I would have them go through scripts, anything written, to pull out errors, to pull out any minor cock-ups, the smallest thing that could present a problem, rather than firing them because they don't agree with me. Amazon, you're idiots. That's what I would have done, and I think you could present a cohesive story of the Second Age and got around the rights issues quite easily by simply implying things. You don't always need to show, you don't always need to tell. Implication can be a great storytelling tool, and sometimes not naming a character, keeping them in the background, implying who they are, rather than outright, this is who it is, and it's very obvious from the get-go. That's a whole thing. So, I do wonder how this could have been if it had been presented in a much more cohesive and strong way. When George R. R. Martin is out doing Tolkien on screen right now, you know there's a problem. And one last thing, and I will put this one into the mix, I think a lot of the characterization is lost, and I would bring those characters back to what's written, because they are really not representative of anything Tolkien wrote, because most of the characters are original. So that's what I would have done. That's how I would have done it. So tell me what you think in the comments below. As always, I'm here. Like, subscribe, and do the usual thing, and all of my links are in the doobly-doo. Yes, I'm quoting John Green. I apologise. I know it's cringy. Anyway, tell me what you think, and I will talk to you guys later.